Hey folks, it's Patriot Nurse. So you've got your beans, your rice, and your canned goods, but are you really prepared for a crisis in the long term? We're going to talk about a key prepping mistake that most people make when it comes to their food storage. Are you making this mistake, and what can you do about it? Let's get started. So what is the main mistake that most people make in long-term food storage? The key mistake that people make is that they focus on calories versus nutrition. Now, on one hand, this might seem really self-explanatory. Like, well, of course, Patriot Nurse, and calories and nutrition, yeah, we know they're important, but don't they go hand in hand? Not necessarily. So when you consider that most people are working on a budget, myself included, we don't have limitless funds, so we have to triage effectively what are we going to spend our money on. For many people in the preparedness world, when they're first getting started in long-term food storage, they focus on things like beans and rice, which of course, you can see back here. But the thing is, beans and rice by themselves, while they do have a lot of macronutrients as far as protein, they certainly have calories, they have carbohydrates, but there is a particular area that many of these long-term shelf-stable foods lack, and that is quality nutrition. So when you look at beans and rice, what do beans have? Well, they have, to a limited degree, they have some vitamin C, they have iron for sure, depending on which of the legume family you choose to utilize. But when you look at rice, for instance, yes, it has plenty of calories. And yes, in some cases, it's fortified to have B vitamins. But all people who are eating something limited like beans and rice are going to end up developing long-term deficits in key nutrients that are essential to help them stay well and healthy, and particularly their immune system functioning well. When you look at long-term disasters, i.e. more than 30 days, you really have to start taking care of the nutritional profile of people in order to stave off those deficits in vitamins, in minerals, and in trace minerals as well. One of the challenges that exists with long-term shelf-stable food storage, more than just the canned foods that you see behind, but I'm talking the Mylar packs, and because of strength limitations here, I'm not really quite able to lift up a 50-pound bag of rice, working towards that. But when you look at these shelf-stable foods, there is a direct corollary to how shelf-stable something is versus how much live and active nutrient profile that it has. So when you look at something like rice and like beans, yes, they're shelf stable. Yes, they'll meet your calorie needs. But because they're dead, effectively, they don't have the ability to nourish your body in the same way that fresh fruits and vegetables do. I'm curious, based on what we've talked about so far, what are the areas that you need to focus on for improving your own preps in your food storage? Leave me a comment below. As an example here, back in the 17 and 1800s, the British Navy started finding that as their exploration was shifting longer and longer and longer in duration around the globe, their sailors started to experience what we now know as scurvy, which is they were losing their teeth, their eyes were becoming sunken, the skin was having issues. Scurvy shows up in different systems in the body. The reason why they were developing scurvy? They were deficient in vitamin C. So interestingly, as a bit of historical trivia, this is the reason why the British Navy are referred to as limeys, because they started adding into the ship's manifest in their stored foods, they started adding limes and citrus fruits to store and to allow people to suck on, the men to suck on, so that way they would get their levels of vitamin C. Now, it's interesting to note because this is an example also of the reticence to adopt new science or new findings in the medical community. It took approximately 50 years from the time that it was recognized by British doctors that yes, vitamin C is part of this. Yes, it's the deficit in this that causes scurvy. It took approximately 50 years for them to actually do something about it. So the medical industry / scientific community has this issue in it that we see even to this very day. But you'll notice that this is one of the things that I have prepped, of course, which is the bottled lemon juice. Another thing that you're going to note is that vitamin D and vitamin A are critical in order to keep your body, in particular your immune system, well functioning. And this is an area that a lot of people are not sufficiently prepped for. One of my favorite preps is actually cod liver oil. And I'm not sponsored by them. My personal favorite is the Green Pastures Fermented cod liver oil. It tastes foul. Be forewarned. Pinch your nose those when you're taking it, friends, because it's pretty stout. There are obviously other brands that are reputable of cod liver oil, particularly if you have small children. They may not be so inclined to actually swallow this, but one of the reasons why fermented cod liver oil and really any good quality cod liver oil is such a critical part of your overall preparedness is that it is a rich source of both vitamin A and vitamin D as well as vitamin E. And why does this matter in particular? Because when you look actually at the diseases that show up long-term in deficits of vitamin A and vitamin D, this is more than just the catastrophic deficits. We're talking subcritical deficits that are not really recognized in everyday things. In fact, most Americans, I would say, are deficient in vitamin D for sure. Where this really starts to show up is in the case of infectious disease. And specifically something that's of important to note right now in the midst of a localized outbreak in Texas of measles, which is now spread to several different states. When you look at the ways that measles was mitigated historically, doctors were telling mothers to give their children cod liver oil primarily because of its vitamin A and its also vitamin D content. This is a very valuable thing to store because we're finding out more and more that it's more than just vitamin D, that also vitamin A is critical in supporting the immune system. And in particular, in cases of measles, there is documented evidence that does show vitamin A supplementation specifically drives down the mortality rate of measles and allows for children in particular to have superior outcomes. But really, anyone who supplements with a high quality cod liver oil is going to see benefits in their everyday life. And for that reason, this is something that I store to plug those nutrient gaps. If you're interested in the things that I recommend, I'll put links in the description box below so that way you can hightail it over there directly to the link and find out if it's going to be a good fit for you. Speaking of nutrition, long-term shelf-stable foods, as we have mentioned previously, are by default dead. They are not alive. They are not vibrant. So there is a trade-off again to this long term. In order for our body to absorb nutrients that we are eating from food, it is an interplay not just of what we eat, but what's happening inside of our digestive tract with the bacteria we've colonized it with. So this I could make an entire video series on in and of itself, but there is a concerted effort to destroy the microbiome, which is the bacterial environment in our intestines. There is a concerted effort to destroy that biome pretty much from the time someone is born in the United States. And it starts from really infancy, where a child's first experience with that new microbiome he's going to live the rest of his life with, it starts as he's making his descent down the birth canal, and it also starts with his first food, whether it's colostrum or whether it's something else. And so how a person's bacterial balance is, it's predictive of lots of different things, not just from how they're going to uptake their nutrients, but also things like chronic disease, type 2 diabetes, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, even immune system regulation. Everything that we're finding out right now seems to suggest that there is a direct correlation between gut health, between nutrient absorption, and overall immune system function. I'm curious, based on what you normally use in your food preparations day to day, what foods do you think you should be buying more of right now? Leave a comment below and share your experience. For that reason, along with my foods that I've stored not just in my pantry, but also for long-term food storage, I also store Green Vibrance. I am not sponsored by them. I pay the same price that you do. Green Vibrance, in my opinion, is probably one of the best stopgap measures that you could have, because not only is it a whole food supplement, so it's rich, of course, in things like trace minerals. Chromium will be an example of this. The trace minerals that are comprised in Green Vibrance are a great spectrum to add to your food storage. You're going to look at anywhere between a 2 to 3 year shelf life for this, but there's something else that's beneficial about Green Vibrance, and that is it has a probiotic profile. So it has a whole spectrum of beneficial bacteria that are great to add to your diet in good times, but also particularly in not so great times. One thing I'd like to add is that fermented fruits and vegetables are a very valuable way to add those probiotics into your regime when it comes to nourishing your body from long-term food storage. One of the ways that this is traditionally accomplished is to ferment cold weather crops, such as cabbage, which many of us have experience with as sauerkraut. If you're Korean, you know well about kimchi, which I personally happen to love kimchi. When you look at fermenting these fruits and vegetables, our ancestors did this just as a standard way of preparing food. It's become less and less popular, but now it's making a resurgence because many people are realizing that they feel better better when incorporating those fermented fruits and vegetables into their diet. Something to try. I'm curious, have you ever done this? What's your experience with sauerkraut and kimchi? Leave me a comment below. So when you consider also that there's usually anywhere between a 6-month to a 1-year startup cost associated with growing a garden and getting live and fresh and nutrifying foods from your backyard onto your table, that startup cost of wait time can really result in a lot of nutrient deficits popping up if they're not being propped up other ways. So the way that I do this myself is I keep a ready supply of green vibrants and I rotate it in my everyday life. And depending on where I'm at, I'll take 1 to 2 scoops a day and I'll put it usually in a smoothie, because I will warn you, this stuff tastes like swamp water, or maybe more close by to what most people can experience. If you can imagine your lawnmower's collection bag, put that in a food processor and that's what it tastes like. But it's great for you and it'll keep you regular, friends. I assure you that. So what did the pioneers do back in the day when they were effectively taking all of their foodstuffs for 6 months in a Conestoga wagon on the back of mules and then heading out west? Well, they obviously weren't capable of pulling with them the full spectrum of nutrients that we know need to be in sufficient amounts in order to stave off disease and illness. And it's for this reason. If you ever played Oregon Trail, invariably you ended up being exposed to pneumonia or, for instance, dysentery or cholera or any of the host of the diseases of old. So one of the things that the pioneers did was they relied upon the remedies of the Indians in those areas. And so red raspberry leaf actually, and any of the brambleberry family, so blackberries as well, any of the leaves of those berries, they're very rich in vitamin C, but red raspberry really is considered the gold standard. So this is a really great example actually of how it is a holistic and stratified approach that we need to adopt in order to be best positioned to be in a case of thriving in the midst of disaster and in the midst of tough times, and not just surviving. Can you survive on just beans and rice? Yes, you can. But really staving off disease and thriving and being in a good place of functioning, that depends on having your nutrients met. And red raspberry leaf is actually rich in citrate of iron, which is a vitamin C isomer. And it's interesting to note that a lot of these herbs that we talk about, not just in my online course, but herbs that are in common usage from Dr. Mom and from things like chamomile and different types of baths, these herbs came into usage because people were not able to meet their nutrient needs with just food alone in many cases. And so the herbs are really a great way, because they are superfoods, to stratify your food preps and add them in where you know that you have nutrient deficits. So which herbs do you need and what do you use? Actually, I have an online course designed to help you with just that. And that's my 7-hour course on herbal preparedness. You can find links below, and also check out the website, thepatriotnurse.com, for everything you need to know there. Friends, I hope this video was helpful for you all. If you did find it helpful, please make sure and share this with one person who you know would be benefited from it. And also, if you enjoy the free content that these videos provide, make sure that you've subscribed to the channel and also click that bell button, because the algorithm's not going to serve these videos up to you unless you have that checked. I hope the video was a blessing to y'all. Have a wonderful week. For now, it's Patriot Nurse signing off, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.